Hi, everyone. It's Mary Strachan here with Kids Who Color Outside the Lines, where we are talking about how we can support kids who think and learn differently at school and at home for lots and lots of success. And today's topic is something that I think you're going to find really helpful because it's all around staying organized. I think this is next to time and maybe homework. I feel like the disorganization that can happen, and then the kind of stress that can kind of happen and then escalate out of that is one of the I don't know. I think it's one of the most frustrating aspects when we think differently. Where's the backpack? Where's that paper, that we were supposed to sign? And things can get really rushed and, spiral out of control pretty quickly. So I am thrilled to have with me today Stacy Erickson from Home Key Organization. So welcome, Stacy, to our series. Hi.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Like I said, this is something, it can be a challenge to keep, especially if there's more than one child in the house, to keep everything organized and running smoothly. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, for sure.
I would love it if you could tell people a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Definitely. So I am the owner of Home Key Organization, which is a home organizing company specializing in child and family environments. So I have a degree in early childhood education, and I've also studied sociology. And before I started my business 4 years ago, and before that I worked in child care and parent education for, probably over 10 years. So the reason I started my business is because there is a lot, there's so much science behind it. It's really interesting. A lot of times people are just stressed out by their environments, and kids get stressed out when the environments are chaotic as well as parents. And we all know that if parents are stressed out, the kids often feed off of that.
Sure.
The world's also different than it was before, so I really feel a need to educate people about the power that stuff has in our life and how maybe we can not give it as much power, because things are definitely different than they were before, even when I was a kid, and I'm not that old yet. So working with kids, I've seen a lot of people who just have great success when they're able to keep their environment a little more structured, and they're just happier in general because they're not ruled by the stuff in their life. Right. So a lot of times I work hands-on with families to find solutions for them that work. I go to their house and we do organization sessions side by side. I also do a lot of writing about organizing and how it relates to child development. So that's pretty much about me. I live in Seattle, and I live in a small space. I live in a 700-square-foot condo. So it's really nice to kind of have this philosophy and also live it for the time being. Trying to make my space work and feel good about it, and know that it's constantly changing and that it's a big part of my life.
Right. I appreciate that you've raised the idea of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to just expand on that a little bit in terms of how it can, I'll give you the choice, either positively impact the kids that we're talking about, or negatively impact, or both. You can choose there.
Definitely. I think a lot of sometimes I'll say a lot of kids do this a certain way, but it's actually a lot of people. What I've noticed is that people in general usually do better with structure. It doesn't have, you don't have to be rigid, but life is, for a lot of people, especially kids, but life is better with routine and structure. People like to know kind of what's coming next. We have calendars and planners so we know what's coming when. And the environment can really help do that. So if you have something out, or a bunch of things out in your, like a bunch of stuff out and you don't know where it goes, that can be really unsettling. It's like, okay, you feel almost out of control. Like, okay, this is happening and I don't quite know where it goes. Or the other thing I like to think about is when I go to a new place, it can be a little scary sometimes not knowing, you know, where the bathroom is and where I get Kleenex and where I sign in or that sort of thing. So having familiarity with what's in your surroundings can really be comforting and can just help you feel comfortable. And when we feel comfortable, we learn a lot better. The other thing that's really interesting is that I've studied when I worked in Head Start, and some of the kids, and Head Start's the federally funded preschool program here in the U.S. In Head Start, I worked with a lot of kids who had trauma, and I took one class about complex trauma, and they were saying that sometimes kids with trauma, they act out because they've had things happen to them before that were kind of out of nowhere and they didn't know what to expect. So sometimes when they go into an environment, they want to know what to expect. Otherwise, sometimes they just get nervous and they break down or they act out. So there's a lot of comfort and learning that comes with having structure and kind of knowing what's coming next or what to look for in your environment and knowing where things are and knowing that you can take care of yourself if you need to. Like, even something as simple as if you don't know if you're a little kid and you need to wash your hands or you need water in the bathroom. If you don't know where it is, that can be unsettling. Like, oh, I got to go. Where's the bathroom? How do I act?
Right.
So it can be a great comfort just to have things just to know where things are and how things work. And it's easier to see how things work when you have an environment which they work inside.
Okay. And also I'm wondering about predictability.
Definitely.
I heard a little bit about predictability. Even like I'm imagining, that you can have security in that predictability of things in your environment.
For sure, definitely. If I know that when I come home and I know where to put my shoes and I know I'm not going to trip over them and I know where my keys go and I know where to hang my coat and it's not very hard for me to hang it up, that's going to make me feel a lot better about those 2 minutes coming in the door than if everything was just everywhere and then I had to deal with it later. So even just as an adult, having that structure is very comforting. And knowing that when I need my shoes, I know where they are. When I need to find my keys, most of the time, they're in the same spot because that's where they go.
Right.
So not perfect.
And it does eliminate a lot of conflict as well when, we're trying to get out the door to whatever we're doing or go to bed and we can't find things. I think that's a common struggle. It's not just happening in my house, I don't think, that, as we said before, things can escalate from that chaos and that uncertainty and that, frustration of just not being able to find things. So you have put together 5 strategies to help keep your family organized without being overwhelmed, which I think is key because when we think about being organized, I think it may, overwhelm people at the thought of having to organize their house. So what would be your first, okay, I'm not off track there. What would be your first strategy to suggest to people?
I think the first thing and the most important thing, not the easiest thing, but the most important thing is just to have less in general. If you have less in your home, it's less to take care of physically, emotionally, and even financially. If you have less, it's just less to deal with. And I think this is one thing I like to relate this to is kids' toys. And I like to, have you heard of, it's called the decision fatigue it's called. So decision fatigue is where you have so many decisions that you just kind of get frustrated and you give up because you can't make a decision because there's too many. So research has found that in the past there was just like a lot less to to choose from in general. Like I like to bring up highlighters. Remember in the past, like highlighters they're yellow and they were fat, and you just had a highlighter.
True.
But now you go to the office supply store and there's a whole aisle of highlighters. And research has shown that when you have more choices, that you second guess yourself more, and then you're actually less satisfied with whatever you choose because you're always second guessing yourself, like, oh, I could have chosen that, or why didn't I choose that, or that sort of thing. It's very weird. So we have so many choices these days that we're less satisfied with the choices we make because we're kind of always looking for the next best thing. There's a book, I forget what it's called, The Power. I'll have to look it up, but it's about decision fatigue. It's very interesting. So if you think of a child and they have a room that's stuffed to the brim with toys, even if they're really organized, so this goes back to having less, and you see, if you're a kid and you see 25 toys, it's pretty overwhelming to choose one thing to play with out of 25 things. And sometimes kids just don't even want to make the toys. So they're just like, I think I'll go bug my parents because this is just too overwhelming to make this choice of finding something to play with. It's very interesting to see how I see a lot of kids that don't really engage with their toys anymore because even just the choosing is just too overwhelming for them. Like, what am I going to play with? And then it's also easy to, as a kid, to revert back to like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to play on my iPad, or this is what I want to do. And I do it as an adult too. Like, there's too much to do. I'm just going to look at Facebook on my phone. So one of the things I really, and then it's funny because this happens even when people are organized. Like, there's some things I've seen with on Pinterest and whatever that's like shelving, and it'll be like a shelf with 8 sections, and each section will have a basket, and the basket will have the toys perfectly sorted, but the baskets will all be full. So you'll have a basket full of blocks and a basket full of cars and a basket full of doll clothes or whatever. Have you kind of seen, you know how people sort things into baskets?
Yes, of course.
So it's great to kind of keep organized, but at the same thing, if you have a basket full of cars and there's 100 cars, and you have a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old dumps out all those sorted hundreds of cars, that's going to be really overwhelming to clean up and for that. So having less can really help just eliminate some of the cleanup battles and some of that decision fatigue. So sometimes I'll put out a little basket with 5 cars in it and just see how with less how much kids engage. And I've done a lot of spaces like this where we'll take away about half of their stuff and just put it away or get rid of it. And I'll get a message later that day, my kids sat and played for the first time in their playroom or in their bedroom. They sat and played for the first time for like a half hour straight, and I've never seen that happen. So it happens a lot where when you have less, you're just able to focus more. It's just not as busy, and it's easier to be like, okay, here's what I have, here's what I have to choose from, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to play. And then also parents have reported to me that their kids, when they have less, they clean up. They're more likely to clean up because of the structure, because it's easier to see where things go.
Right. Okay. And you know what I'm wondering if it happens if we see our kids not playing with their toys, I feel like maybe we think, oh, we've got to get something new. They're bored of that. They've outgrown it. So, or we need to add to the, the tracks of the, whatever it is, add to the collection, because they're not playing with it anymore. I have never thought that it might be because of decision fatigue.
And what's so interesting is that it's a fun experiment to do because you're not really losing anything from it. So you can try it on your kids and, take away half, put it in storage or whatever. If it really doesn't work for you or your child, that's okay. You can always put stuff back. It's nothing's permanent in organizing, or nothing has to be.
Right.
Unless it works, then you might want
to. Okay.
It's a really cool thing. It's just fascinating to see how it changes the patterns of play. And play is how we learn, right? So if we're able to increase playtime, then that's good.
Okay.
Awesome.
Next one.
So the next one, I have it written down. It says, keep it simple. Very, very simple. So that's kind of a broad statement, but what I mean by that, even one of the things by keeping it simple we were just talking about, instead of having 100 cars, have The other things that I have a couple other favorite examples. My first favorite example is a clothes hamper. So funny enough, a lot of parents I find complain about their kids leaving their clothes on the floor, but then they don't have a hamper in their room. So I had one client, she said, well, my kids leave their clothes all over the floor. I said, well, where are they supposed to go? And she's like, in the laundry room. And I'm like, well, the laundry room's on a different floor. So it's a nice expectation to say, okay, my kids are going to get undressed at the end of the day and walk their clothes up the flight of stairs to the laundry room. Probably not super likely to happen just because it's not simple. It's complicated to gather up all your clothes and walk upstairs and put them in the right place. So in that example, to keep it simple, you would put a hamper in their room so that it's just one step for them to put the clothes in the hamper. And then it reduces stress for you because when you need to do laundry, or either parent or kids need to do laundry, then you can just take it out of that hamper and bring it up. The other interesting thing about hampers, totally mind-blowing that people don't think about, is that you have to generally with a hamper for kids and for adults as well, they work better if they don't have a top or a lid. Yeah. Because I've seen so many times, and I do this too because I have this really fancy hamper with a lid. If you have a hamper with a lid, the clothes go on top. I still do it. You know, my bathroom one is like a vintage one. It has a lid. Yeah, the clothes don't go in it. They go on top. So having something that even just reducing the steps of walking to the laundry room, that's one thing. But then reducing them down even further so you don't have the step of opening it up to put them in, you're going to be more successful. And of course it's not foolproof. I wish. That'd be cool. But the easier it is for kids to complete a task like that, the more likely it is that they'll do it. The other example I like to use for this is coats and hanging them up. What we do generally is we put coats on hangers, right? You come in and you hang up your coat. Right, no one does that. I want to say we do that. We don't do that. Most people don't. Usually people come in and they put their coat on a chair or in a pile or whatever. And that's just, when you've come home from a long day, you don't want to have to spend 10 seconds putting a coat on a hanger and hanging it up. And when you're a kid and you're short, and say you have to climb up a stool to hang it up, that's, again, another step. Or some kids don't even really have the motor skills yet to put a coat on a hanger. So what I say to people is just put some, wherever it's convenient in your house, put some hooks up, and then it's one step to hang the coat on a hook rather than, however many steps to put it on a hanger. And make sure the hooks are low so that your child can reach it. So that's another one where you have to put a little bit of thought into it, but keep it simple and things are more likely to happen with organizing. Yeah. It's exciting. I love this stuff. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, no, and I can see how it again, these small things can make a big difference. Yeah, so keep it simple, very, very simple. And simple, I think, for not just the parents, but the kids too. And sometimes I think what we think is simple maybe isn't always simple for the child. And I'm not even talking about like young kids, like can be in, your older kids too. So I'm just kind of veering off out of the tips for a minute, but do you involve the kids in kind of saying, like, do you look at kind of what happens and then, just tweak it to keep things a little bit more tidied and organized and involve the kids in it as well?
In most instances, yes. There's a couple different things to think about. When it's things like that with just making little changes, usually it's easy to involve the kids and be like, hey, this is here to make it easier for you. When it comes to bigger things like decluttering a whole room, like, I mean, I have kids who have, really, really messy rooms, and the amount of stuff needs to be reduced and then it has to be organized. Some kids aren't emotionally ready to let go of items, even if they're really not important items. Right. So So say you have a 4-year-old and you say, hey, we're going to get rid of all your stuff. A lot of 4-year-olds are going to be like, no, and it's going to make it really hard and you're not going to get anywhere. The thing is, a lot of the stuff you're going to get rid of in the process, the 4-year-old will never remember anyway. So unless the kid's really emotionally ready, which doesn't happen often, usually I have the kids not in the house, and I work with the parent to say, okay, we're going to get rid of this stuff. If you're afraid that you're getting rid of something that they will notice is gone, you don't have to get rid of it yet, but like bag it up and put it in the garage for a while, so that you have kind of a clean slate. So then your child comes home and you say, we organize, and usually I say tell them beforehand. Tell them beforehand that you're going to be organizing. Like, don't surprise them because that can be bad. But and say, okay, we're going to organize your room today, so it will be easier to clean up and we have more time to play together. And then organize it. And then when they come home, it's kind of like a clean slate. Because if you think about, most people have an organizer, even if they don't have an organizer. A room that's that cluttered is difficult for an adult to clean up. So why are we expecting that of children when it's so difficult for adults?
Right. Yes.
So, so yeah, it really depends on if I involve the child, but a lot of the time, especially if it's decluttering, unless they're older, I do not. And it's not to be deceptive at all or anything like that. It's just their lives are generally going to be better if they get rid of all the stuff that's that's making their room cluttered. I do have a lot of parents who will spend the whole session worrying about their child missing things, and I don't think I've ever had a child get mad. Usually they come home like, I love my space. This is so cool. I'm so happy to have a clean room. They're not like, where'd that little thing go? Usually they don't even notice. So it is a delicate balance. You want to be honest, but not too honest. Like, I just try to really look at it and make sure it's ethical and fits with what the kids' needs are, and you're not getting rid of important things. But no one's really had a problem. But it's a delicate thing for sure.
Yes, for sure.
So you have to make sure it's something that the parent is comfortable with, and if they're not, of course, don't do it. So.
Okay. All right. Okay, back to the tips. Number 3.
Yeah. Number 3 is model behavior. So, and that's with anything, right? If the children are sponges, and if you want children to act a certain way or behave a certain way, if you do it, it's going to be easier for them to do it. Like eating, right? If you tell your child to eat vegetables and you eat fried food all the time, it's not going to be as easy for them to do that. So even sometimes with smaller kids, it can be talking through what you're doing. Like, oh, here's my dirty clothes. When I'm done with them, I put them in the hamper right here. And just making it obvious what you're doing. That can be a really good way to do it. Even with decluttering as well. Even if your child's not really ready for that yet, you can just say, oh, I found this shirt in my dresser. I never wear it, so I'm going to donate it to Goodwill, and then have them go donate it with you. So just whatever behavior that you desire in your children, just think of, are you doing that? And then make sure you are. So it can be lots, like hanging up coats. If you want your kids to hang up their coats, but yours is always on the couch, that's just something to think about. And it seems obvious, but a lot of people don't think about that. And that's okay. Right. I don't think we're trained to do that. I get it. So or even like if you want your child to clean off your desk, but your office is a wreck, that doesn't really send the right message. And it's easier said than done. None of this stuff is easy, but even if it's just a small thing that you can do, like you're like, I really want my kid to clean their room. You clean your room first and make sure they see you doing it and tell them about it. Like, oh, I cleaned my room and now I feel better because everything has a place. Right. So that's an interesting thing to think about in the whole process, but it really does make a difference when they see you doing things that are
yes, and
habits.
I think, what happens is I was saying this in an earlier interview about how we just, it becomes almost like we're on autopilot, and we don't necessarily see. So, as you know, I was in Florida for a little while, and we were at my sister's condo, which is, it's a small space, but it's very uncluttered, and it's beautiful and cozy, and then I came home to my house, and everywhere I looked, it was like, oh my gosh, there's so much clutter. Like even in the Tupperware drawer, I'm like, oh, I see this every day. I'm in that, drawer getting out some stuff for lunch to pack lunches, and I didn't notice, I just didn't notice it until I had a little break from it and I was in an environment that was really quite uncluttered. And I was like, oh, okay. So sometimes I think, in fairness to us, we live in it all the time. We might just not notice until we, have some other, something that, or I think an incident where we realize, oh my gosh, we can't do this anymore like this. We've got to, sort something out that works, better. That's a little, you can find a pen when you need a pen or whatever it is. So I like this concept of modeling, behavior and being aware of our own spaces and, what they look like.
Our culture really isn't setting us up for success with this, unfortunately. What we're pretty much being told through marketing that more is always better, or the newest thing is always better. So culture is not very conducive to having less, and that's hard. That's really difficult. So being mindful of it just takes a little extra thinking about it.
Right.
And I think what I would love to do with my business is just let people know that this is how it is and that's okay, and here's how we can make it better. Because really, culturally, they just businesses want to sell us, and I just really think with reducing the amount of stuff we have, we can just make a huge difference in our lives and just feel better. So I'm excited to send that message out.
Yeah, for sure. And a relief too, as you said, even financially, to know that we can, stop buying things and it's okay. It might mean that,
you'll feel better, not worse.
Yeah, save some money for a trip, or you know what I mean? There's lots of things that we can do with extra money. So, okay, back to your tips. We have 2 more. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then I have one question for you after that.
For sure.
So.
Okay, sounds good. The next one is avoid over-sorting. So this comes more toward just organizing toys or organizing anything. I had a client a couple of years ago, and her daughter had Polly Pockets. And Polly Pockets are different than when I was a kid. They're actually little dolls. They're maybe a couple inches tall, and they have these rubber clothes that kind of go on, and they have rubber shoes and accessories. And she said, well, I have, I bought this for her, and it was a little, almost case with compartments. And she said, so the shirts go here, and the skirts go here, and the pants go here, and so you could sort out all of Polly Pocket's stuff. And she's like, but she just doesn't keep it up. I'm like, well, what about, see that laundry basket right there? Was a wicker laundry basket. I'm like, why don't you just put it all in there? And she's like, all of it? I'm like, yeah. And does she play with other dolls too, about the same size, or animals? And she's like, yeah. And she's like, all of it, just put it all in one basket? And I said, well, does she only play with Polly Pocket, or does Polly Pocket play with, the plastic animals or the Barbies or whatever? I'm like, is she discriminatory who she plays with? And she's like, no, she plays with all of them at once. So I said, and every child is different, but it might be easier for your child if you just put it all in one spot. She dumps it out, and when it's time to clean up, she puts it all back. A lot of our play isn't as compartmentalized as we think it is. As adults, we're like, oh, everything of this kind of thing should go together. But sometimes it's okay to just say, okay, I'm going to put everything in one space, and they can play with it, and they can put it back.
Right.
It's less pressure for the child to keep up with the system that they didn't even make up or even care about.
Yes.
There's a similar thing with that I've seen a lot online with Legos. People really like to sort Legos by color.
Okay.
Some kids love that, and they thrive on it, and it's the best thing that would ever happen to them. I enjoy that now as an adult, sorting Legos. If your child's the type who does that, go for it. However, a lot of kids aren't. It really depends on the child. A lot of kids, it's overwhelming for them to keep up. It's okay to not sort your Legos by color. If they're all in one bin, that's okay. As long as it makes it easier to clean up, because it does look cool and it's awesome. But a lot of times we just kind of stress ourselves out trying to keep up with these systems. For our kids, and it's just it's really serving anyone.
Right. And if it doesn't work, then
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the internet perpetuates this a lot too, because there's a lot of really cute organizing stuff online that I just,
Right.
but it's, yeah, cool, but child development wise, it is just not really appropriate for anyone, for, you know, it is appropriate for only children.
Okay.
So, yeah, and that, which actually brings me to the next tip, if you're ready.
Yep, go ahead.
Which is keep your child's unique needs in mind. Because
yes.
everyone's so different, and there's no one size fits all. You could have the kid who their favorite thing in the world is just sort of their Legos, so do it. Or you could have a kid who loves their doll clothes and wants to hang them all up and have them inside the doll wardrobe. Or you could just have the kid who can throw them in a basket and be fine, and that's an easy way to clean up. So it really is different for everyone. And like I said earlier, it's nice because nothing's permanent, and you can try lots of different things. So you could try something for a month, and if it doesn't work, you can try something else. And that's nice because with even as an adult, I feel like my organizational needs are constantly changing. I'll try something and it won't work, and then I'll rearrange it and I'll try something else. And kids too, they're at a stage of such rapid development. What might work when they're younger might not work when they're older, and the other way around. So you really have to be in tune with what they like and what they don't like and their needs, and just go with that rather than like, this is a good system and I'm going to use it, because it might be
so some flexibility.
Totally, yeah, definitely. Yeah, because we're all so different, and even my clients are also different too. So I don't really subscribe to one system for anyone. You just have to see what works. A lot of times, the system that's going to work best for you or your child is not the prettiest system, and that can be disappointing for people because you want it to look pretty and Pinteresty. But if it's not and it works and it makes it so you're able to keep things where you can find them, go with it. And you can always find ways to make it look better over time and improve it.
Right. Okay. My question, and I think kids are natural collectors to start with, but I think there are kids that take it to perhaps a more emotional level, and maybe I'm not describing this well, but I think people might understand where I'm going. That the collection, there's a lot of emotional investment in it, and may cause a lot of clutter also. So, just a lot of visual simulation as well. Yeah. So, do you want to
see this a lot with the tops of dressers and bookshelves and stuff like that?
Yes.
Yep. It's about, that starts around like 7, I mean a little earlier, but 7 is like the perfect age for that. But yeah, I totally feel you. So just ways to make that better.
Yeah, like again, having less is, I think we can all agree that's a great strategy, but when they collect, how do you keep the less in that equation? Do you advise to, rotate out, or, keep your top favorite 10, or maybe there's not one solution like you're saying that fits all, but
definitely. There's a lot of things that you can do. The one thing I'm thinking about with like smaller collections like rocks or sticks or pine cones or whatever is sometimes it's nice to get, I like see-through jars that are all the same size. And then at least like if the container is the same size and they're in a line, it kind of looks a little neater. And then you can still see it because it's in a glass jar, but then it's like the uniformity of the containers makes it look good. But then a lot of things also you can't size like that. It's figurines and medals and that sort of thing. So, I mean, there's so many different ways to go about it. I think it might be even just like every 6 months doing a sweep of whatever space has collected stuff. Be like, okay, we're checking in on this. Here's all the things you have. Are there any that you're just not really feeling anymore? Are there any that you think other kids might enjoy? Even if it's just like, today can you choose one thing that can move on for another kid? And sometimes I might say no, but I encourage people to start kind of flexing that decluttering muscle as early as possible and just be like, we're going to choose one thing today. this is what do you think? And then just be like, well, I can choose a thing. It's not to be mean by any means, but just because you can't just have all the stuff in your home forever, or else you won't be able to walk anymore,
right.
especially stuff kids have.
Yes. So to get into the habit.
That muzzle. Yeah.
Right.
And then the other thing is you can, as long as it's not too much stuff. Some people I know, they like to do like a little box for every like year, because I think a lot of that stuff is like sports trophies and medals and art projects. So even just like buy boxes of a size that's manageable for you to store and say, okay, every year you get a box and it has to fit in the box.
Right.
And if it doesn't, you have to get rid of it. So,
right.
And it's hard to do that stuff, but you really have to think if they're in school for 10 years or however long, and you have all the 10 huge boxes, that's not going to serve them very well when they have to move out. It's going to be hard. So just thinking about, and it's easier to do it as you go along than than at the end, because that's that's how we kind of get into it,
that's a lot.
This hard clutter stuff. So
we have a treasure box of really special things that most, for my daughter that were drawn, whatever it is, but and I'm kind of like, okay, when it gets full, then we go through and we've got to make room for the next batch of treasures. So, sometimes those are papers usually, or like little things that can go in a reasonable sized box in our room. And sometimes we don't know where to put things. And so it's a question of, is that something that you treasure? And so yes or no. And if it's a treasure, then, and like you said, in 6 months, it might not be a treasure anymore.
Definitely. And that's how we work as adults too, right? Like our interests change over time.
Sure.
Like something that I'm wearing today, I feel really good in, and it might not be good in a year. So, it's nice that we just have the ability to be always changing and evolving, and that our stuff can too.
Mhm. That's great. Thanks so much for going over those tips and for giving the great examples too. I think that helps, really bring it to life for people. It really, the modeling the behavior is, what's standing out for me right now in terms of the tips, at least for myself. I'm curious to know for the listeners, which, what thing kind of jumped out for them. But I think the modeling behavior is really standing out for me. So that's some little food for thought for me to consider in the next couple of weeks as this wraps up, how I can model some organizing behavior in the family. So thanks so much, Stacy, for coming on and being with us today. It was great. You have a little gift for listeners if they are interested. Why don't you tell people what you've got going on there?
Yeah, if you go over to my website, which is homekeyorganization.com, there's a sidebar, and then I'll do a direct link too. I think we can include in later.
It's in the email today.
The email, perfect. So it's a ebook. It's simple, not a super hard read, so you can get through it and use it. And it's called 9 Cleanup Tips for Kids That Actually Work. So it's just different ways that you can encourage your children to clean up that have been really effective for me working with children all these years. And there's some pictures in there too.
Oh, great. Okay. Look for the link in your email from today. But your website, Stacy, is?
So it's homekeyorganization.com. So HOMEKEY organization.com.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you very much for coming on and tackling clutter with us and teaching us some really simple things that we can do to think about our environment and the positive impact it can have in kids to kind of get them out of the chaos that can come, naturally with kids. So I really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate that too.
Good. And for our listeners, be sure to log on tomorrow and check your email, because I'm going to send you the link to our next interview. and I'll talk to you then.